Okay, thank you very much, Chairman, and it's great to see so many of you here at this hour of the morning. Has the political landscape changed forever? Well, forever is a very long time. I think we may be dealing with an epochal era, all right. So a lot of what I have to say will be retrospective and trying to understand where I think we are now. The general election of 2011 was extraordinary by any standards, and it might well rank with 1918 and 1927 as seminal electoral events in Irish history. And just to contextualise it, in June 2002, we saw the triumphal re-election of Fianna Fáil and their surrogate party, the Progressive Democrats, under the popular leadership of Taoiseach Bertie Ahern, to the government of a prosperous, dynamic Celtic Tiger Island where everything was possible and where the sun of optimism never set. Peace was established throughout the island, the economy was roaring ahead, property development was creating unimaginable wealth for some and spreading well-being to many as people saw the value of their houses grow year by year. Ireland seemed to have discovered the secret of wealth creation and thought itself to be the envy of the world, all under the benign, wise and all-embracing leadership of a Fianna Fáil party at the height of its powers. That was 2002, not very long ago. Fine Gael was in disarray and defeat, and in the opinion of many respected commentators, on the road to irrelevancy and eventual extinction. It was a far cry from the glory days of the 80s when the party under Garret Fitzgerald contended mightily with Fianna Fáil for the leadership role in Ireland's future, a war which then seemed comprehensively lost. 15 years of disunity and internecine warfare had culminated in another and this time successful coup against its leader John Bruton, left the party demoralised, weak and divided, and the new leader, Michael Noonan, had little time to consolidate, let alone reorganise the party before being thrown into a general election in 2002, in which Fine Gael, despite having recently then led a successful rainbow government, failed to define a coherent political position for itself and ended up being strangely irrelevant and somewhat ignored. The outcome was shockingly bad and worse than anyone really expected. Of the party's 54 seats, 23 were lost, and much of the leadership bit the dust. And then its future looked bleak. The Labour Party then, under determined leadership of Rory Quinn, failed to gain from Fine Gael's decline. The spoils went to Fianna Fáil and to the PDs, who between them won a total of 89 seats. And Fianna Fáil were tantalisingly close to an overall majority at 81 seats. Now that was the position in 2002. 2007 showed the beginnings of change, with Fine Gael reasserting itself as a vibrant and relevant political party and with the virtual destruction of the Progressive Democrats. Fianna Fáil, however, held its ground under its still popular leader, aided by the widespread perception of a robust and still buoyant economy. And the Labour Party and Sinn Féin also held their ground, and there was little enough to forewarn of events to come. However, significantly, the demise of the PDs meant that Fianna Fáil had to depend on the support of the Green Party in forming its new government, an event which weakened the political coherence of that government in the face of the challenging times which were coming. And then we had the general election of 2011. Which in many ways may have changed everything. Of the 89 seats which supported the 2002 government, only 20 were left. Fine Gael became the largest party in the Dáil for the first time, with gains over that period of 45 seats, and its largest ever total of 76. The Labour Party also gained its highest ever total, with 37 seats, having gained 17 over the period. And Sinn Féin emerged as a serious force in domestic politics for the first time with 14 seats. But the real story of the election was Fianna Fáil. Despite warning in the local elections of 2009, despite the defeat of Owen Ryan and leaving the party without any Euro seat in Dublin in 2009, and despite a whole series of opinion polls, few people were really prepared for what actually happened. The party's vote declined from 42% in 2007 to 17%. That was an unprecedented decline of 25% in any circumstance. Seat total fell from 78 to just 20. Again, an unprecedented loss of 58 seats. The devastation of most of their leadership corps was of perhaps even greater significance. Apart from the leader Micheál Martin and Brian Lenihan, only Eamon O'Quiv of the outgoing leadership made it back to the Dáil. Their wipeout in the metropolitan area around Dublin is difficult to imagine. In that area there are 65 seats. Fianna Fáil defended 28 of those and emerged with only one. And by a cruelest of fortune, that one seat has now been lost due to the death of Brian Lenihan. A great loss to the country, but a truly tragic loss, I believe, to his party, which will now struggle to retain that seat in the by-election. So now we have, I think, a real question on our hands. Will the 21st century generate a different political model for Ireland than that which dominated by Fianna Fáil the 20th century? Has the Irish political scene been changed forever? I think the answer lies largely in whether Fianna Fáil will recover and to what extent, and how the other parties, including Fine Gael, Labour and Sinn Féin, avail of their new opportunities. But first, I think we should look a little bit more deeply into Fianna Fáil. I know Avril Power will be discussing it, but this topic is largely about Fianna Fáil. I just give my own personal perspectives on it. Fianna Fáil, after all, is one of the greatest democratic parties that Europe has seen, and its longevity and its sheer capacity to survive and to govern and to win elections has been unparalleled in any country, I think, by any democratic party that I can think of. So we have to really consider why it arrived at the point it did arrive at. Fianna Fáil has dominated Irish politics since its foundation in 1927. Its founder, Eamon de Valera, knew that the Irish Free State, established under the Anglo-Irish Treaty in 1922, was there to stay after the decisive result of the Civil War and the successful early years of the Cumann and Gael government. But the 5 years which they spent outside parliamentary politics between 22 and 27 gave the new party, when split from Sinn Féin, an ideological authenticity on the Republican issue, which was to serve it very well for 80 years. The search for the Holy Grail of the united 32-county Republic made a safe transition into Fianna Fáil, which proceeded to dominate in various degrees all Irish elections since 1927. Each election was Fianna Fáil or anybody but Fianna Fáil, with the balance of preference generally being with the large party. As recently as the McGill School in 2007, reviewing the general election of that year, my own conclusion was that, and I'm quoting myself then in 2007, Fianna Fáil remains a determined, capable political force and still by some distance the leading party in Irish politics. It will never relinquish power easily, and its current chameleon quality of being able to accommodate allies from any quarter makes the task of giving Ireland the change of government an even more challenging one. Well, let's just look at on what that success was built. Fianna Fáil emerged from the remnants of Sinn Féin after the turmoil of the War of Independence and the Civil War with top-quality leadership and an excellent political positioning. It embraced an ideological commitment to the concept of an all-Ireland Republic, which found expression in the famous twin national aims of freeing the 6 counties from British rule and restoring Irish as the everyday spoken language of the people. It also embraced the populism and the support for the common man, be it the working class or the small farmer, which further differentiated it from their establishment opponents, and was effective, particularly as the impact of the international crash of 1929 took hold in Europe and Ireland in the 30s. These values enabled Fianna Fáil to dominate Irish politics until the 80s. It became the only party that could govern on its own, the only safe pair of hands for government of Ireland, and a party which, apart from the twin national aims, took a totally pragmatic approach to policy, allowing it to change with the needs of the time. Furthermore, it was careful never to seriously attempt to implement either of the twin national aims, or indeed to drain the Shannon, which was Eamon de Valera's other perpetual election pledge. Government on its own became a ruling principle, and a very important one for Fianna Fáil, and that was abandoned only in 1989 when Charles Haughey decided to share power with the PDs. Albert Reynolds at the time described it as a temporary little arrangement, but that little arrangement never actually went away for them. It broke a mould and led to a period during which Fianna Fáil increasingly lost control of its own destiny in a way that Eamon de Valera would have found intolerable. The decline of the party probably began there, but when it effectively gave up the principle of not sharing power. Another vital and more recent factor was the loss of the twin national aims. The reunification of Ireland was redefined by other politicians and statesmen, such as John Hume, Garret Fitzgerald, Conor Cruise O'Brien, and a host of others during the latter decades of the 20th century. A redefinition which was eventually fully embraced by Fianna Fáil under Albert Reynolds and Bertie Ahern in particular. This ultimately resulted in the Good Friday Agreement being ratified by referenda on both sides of the border, with standing down of the armies and the decommissioning of the arms of the various paramilitary forces of the Troubles. A side effect of these great national events was that Fianna Fáil, despite playing a leading role, indeed in many ways the leading role in the peace process, lost its great national aim of reunifying Ireland as a differentiator from other parties, because all of the major parties now espoused the same policy on the national question. And the second twin national aim, to restore the language, was allowed to die through neglect. So despite losing its ability to govern on its own, and despite losing its differentiation over the national question, Fianna Fáil still retained into the first decade of this century its reputation as being the safest and the best party to govern Ireland, the party of wealth creation and the party of social cohesion. And this reputation was strong enough to carry them successfully through the general elections of 1997, 2002 and 2007. But then this invaluable reputation has recently been comprehensively destroyed in an unprecedented and an aggravated way. The economic independence of the country has been so compromised that we've had to surrender much of our hard-won independence to the international troika that we're so familiar with. Indeed, it was interesting when Brian Lenihan starkly compared his feelings to those of the French generals must have felt when they surrendered to Germany in 1940, when he had to go where no Irish minister before him ever had to go, to sign the deal of surrender with the troika on Ireland's behalf. The resultant political damage to Fianna Fáil has been immense. It is worse then than the surrender of national sovereignty. That's only one element. There has been a wholesale destruction of the wealth, the livelihoods, the pensions and the savings of a whole generation of Irish citizens. That makes it personal. Furthermore, it is not just perceived as mismanagement, but also as a saga of greed, of avarice, of overweening arrogance, and even of corruption, embracing politicians, bankers, developers, and ultimately the whole apparatus of the social partnership, all under the patronage of Fianna Fáil and symbolised in people's minds by the fundraising tent at the Galway races. The anger which resulted led to the electoral destruction visited on the party in 2011, the virtual wipeout of their leadership, and the demise of their hard-won reputation for sound economic management. So therefore, as I see it, all of the pillars on which that great 20th century success of Fianna Fáil was built now lie in ruins. And then what is left? And will the party revive and thrive again? Now, political history shows that great parties are enduring organisms, so long as the reason for their existence remains. Some parties have, however, failed. The Irish Parliamentary Party of Butt, Parnell and Redmond, which dominated for over 50 years, lost its franchise to Sinn Féin in 1918 and ultimately, I think, to Fine Gael. It lost the will to live as a party. the great British Liberal Party, which dominated in the 19th century, the party of Gladstone and Asquith and Lloyd George, and it up to the end of the First World War, lost its raison d'etre to the Labour Party in Britain in the 1920s, and never properly recovered, despite remaining active to the present day, and it's even now in coalition, but very much as a minor partner. And another party, the great Italian Christian Democratic Party, which was continually in government for 50 years in Italy after the Second World War, became so enmeshed in corruption that its reputation was irredeemably destroyed, and it disappeared entirely from the political map. By contrast, the Canadian Conservative Party, which after an unpopular period in government lost all of its seats, bar 3, has since staged an effective recovery and is now back in government in Canada. And we've already referred to the recovery mounted by Fine Gael after 2002. Facing into the 21st century, then, how do the various parties stand? Well, to talk about Fine Gael here, it has, in my opinion, successfully transformed itself from a perennial number 2 into a confident leading party firmly placed on the centre-right of Irish politics. In fact, Fine Gael had an unenviable reputation recently as being one of the longest-living, most enduring and least successful democratic parties that ever was founded. It spent the vast majority of its time out of power, but it was always number 2. It never was shifted out of that position. That, I think, that may have now changed. Its dramatic recovery after 2002 has given a great influx of new talent in Dáil and Senate, people with political focus and attitude. It has a strong and professional organisation, nationwide, a large individual membership and a sound internal economy. It is led in a dynamic and focused way by Enda Kenny, the Taoiseach, supported by a team which portrays modernity as well as a good mixture of experience. The response of the party and its leader to the recent Cloyne report could not have been in more marked contrast to that of John A. Costello and his colleagues in the mother and child controversy in the 50s, which is a symbolic explication of the way this party has fundamentally changed, in my opinion. Fine Gael displays a sense of radicalism in approaching a governing system from which the party has been too long excluded. It is, under Kenny, a party of radical democratic republicanism. In many ways, the new Fine Gael carries very little baggage into the new century, and it has the look and feel of a 21st century political party. It has little emotional attachment to what it was in the 20th century, and it is extraordinarily ambitious for what it means to be in the 21st century. So it almost feels like it's a new party. It is by definition open to Europe and to the world. It is less statist than any of its major rivals and less emotionally committed to national institutions and systems which ultimately it sees as not having served the country well. It is therefore prepared to conceive and perhaps implement the radical change the country now needs. Its future will in many ways be defined by its current period in government. If by 2016 the fiscal situation is stabilised, the economy is growing, unemployment is falling, and the Troika has departed our shores, Fine Gael will have built a sound foundation of government achievement on which it can build in the years ahead, and it would have the prospect of remaining the largest political party in Ireland for years and perhaps even for decades. However, one question mark remains over Fine Gael. I'm sure more than one, but one strikes me immediately. Despite leading government 6 times, the party has never been re-elected after a period in office. It seems to have difficulty learning that the business of politics does not end when the business of government begins. The structures and systems that deliver success out of opposition are dispersed throughout various areas of government when in office. And Fine Gael has not in the past acquired the skill of governing in a manner that enabled it to remain politically viable, a skill that in the past came naturally to Fianna Fáil and, for instance, to the British Conservative Party. That is a skill Fine Gael must acquire if it is to succeed in the long term. The Labour Party likewise is looking forward with a measure of confidence. It is dynamically led by Eamon Gilmore, and it is now at a historic high point and has made a principled decision in taking on the challenge of government with Fine Gael, when many said they should have moved aside and stayed to lead the opposition. But that, I think, is to misunderstand Labour. It is not just the age profile of their front bench that impelled Labour to embrace the challenge of government. Apart from a brief period in the 1960s, Labour has always been a party of government. I'm referring to the 60s, the 70s will be socialist era when Labour under Brendan Corrish decided in 1965 and 69 that they would not go into government in coalition with anybody on the fond illusion that they might win an overall majority themselves. All of that period, they've always been a party of government. And this is its seventh government with Fine Gael, and it also governed between 1992 and 94 with Fianna Fáil. The recent election has reinvigorated Labour in every way. It is larger, more youthful and more confident. It has gained significantly from the decline of Fianna Fáil and now standing clearly as the strongest force in the centre-left of the Irish political spectrum. Its immediate future, like that of Fine Gael, will be hugely influenced by its experience in government, where the quasi-national character of the present government enables the two parties to devise and implement a coherent action plan sufficient to address the enormous challenges faced by the country. Now, Fianna Fáil, we've already discussed, it is facing its future with immense challenges, as we know. It has lost much of its ideological underpinning and may require redefinition and repositioning politically. It has lost its grip on power at local as well as at national level. In the past, Fianna Fáil was said to be occasionally out of government but never out of power. Not so this time. It has lost its reputation for competence and wealth creation. It has lost most of its deputies, virtually all of its leadership, and it is said to be in significant debt, while its income-raising capacity is restricted by its loss of parliamentary representation and by the new puritanism on political fundraising which now pervades Ireland. Specifically, it is saddled with the blame for the tragedy which has befallen Ireland and many of its citizens in their personal lives. It has suffered huge reputational damage from being seen as a party of the developer and the banker-builder cabal which drove the country over the edge. It is a party which either indulged in total denial or else completely misjudged the crisis facing Ireland in recent years, made panicky and sometimes fatally flawed decisions, and left the country as well as itself defenceless in the face of a perfect storm of adversity. On the other hand, it has its history, its tradition, its pride. It has an organisation which reaches into every parish in Ireland. It has a committed, even if reduced, activist base, and it will have an iron determination to succeed. And it would be foolhardy, in my opinion, to predict the demise of such a party. Sinn Féin may have a somewhat symbiotic relationship with Fianna Fáil. If Fianna Fáil stays down, Sinn Féin will have an increasing influence, while the Fianna Fáil recovery will limit their opportunities. But one way or another, they are an important player and have carved a definite niche for themselves on the left of the spectrum of Irish politics. So what is going to happen, and prediction is a fool's game really in this kind of thing. One confident prediction for me is that Fianna Fáil will not dominate Irish politics again. And in that sense everything has changed. It has utterly dominated Irish politics from 1927 until 2011. That will not be the story in the future. Fine Gael has actually got a better shot at fulfilling that role in the new era, but the jury also remains out on that. The prospects for new parties, in my opinion, remains bleak. Fine Gael's move to the right and Sinn Féin's growth on the left means that the political spectrum, in my opinion, is well covered, more so now than at any time in our history. And the extreme right has never been a good hunting ground for politicians in Irish politics. We will continue to have coalition governments, so that the experience of the last 20 years will continue, along a fairly standard European model. And in that respect, there will be continuity as well as change. The make-up of those governments is not predictable, in my opinion. The present government of Fine Gael and Labour spans left and right, and if successful, could form a durable template. Likewise, in the future, Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil could present a coherent option, as could Labour and Sinn Féin if the numbers began to add up. Labour in the past have coalesced with Fianna Fáil. That, of course, could happen again, and Sinn Féin, as in Northern Ireland, will eventually become a realistic option. It is also quite possible that you could have a centre-right, centre-left configuration in Irish politics, with, say, for instance, Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil merging into one another to form a strong party, and you could see the other alternative to that relatively easily emerging. And I'm pretty certain that we're going to continue to have vibrant democratic politics in Ireland. Right since the middle of the 19th century, this country is wedded to the principle of constitutional democratic politics, and that will undoubtedly, in my opinion, continue. The lessons of our recent tragedy should lead to more openness and accountability in politics, and I'm sure it will. Parliaments will, I think, be now in the future more protective of democracy, and I think will be reformed and more effective in their operation. Undemocratic decision-making, such as was characterised in elements of the recent social partnership arrangement, will, I think, certainly be avoided in the future. Also, the era of tribal politics is over. The era of allegiances rooted in the old events like the Civil War are over. Our relationship with the Catholic Church and all of its attendant bureaucracies like the Vatican has now been defined in a much more decisive, strong Republican way, and that will inform the politics of the future. And I hope, and this is the last thing I will say, that victory in future elections will have to be won on realistic policies and on performance in government. And if this comes about, the future is sure to be better than the past. Thank you very much.